Kia ora, everybody, and welcome to TENS's July webinar. Before I introduce the session today, I'll introduce myself. My name is Sarah Washbrook. I am Himana Tuarua, which is Deputy Chair for the TENS Council. And it is my honour today to be here hosting and presenting the webinar for today. Before we start the session, we will begin with our karakia. Maori ora ki a mātou, arahina mātou I a mātou mahi, ki mihia he huarahi mō te kōpapa o te mātaranga hangarau, a whina atu, a whina mai, te po e here ne I a mātou, hui tai ki e. So before I introduce our awesome guest today that's joining us, just going to give you a couple of housekeeping notes from the webinar. The webinar, as you may be aware, is being recorded. The recording will be going up onto the TENS YouTube channel, but if you obviously don't want to have faces and things on there, obviously keep your cameras off. During today, the session may be slightly more interactive, and so you may be invited to put your ideas and thoughts forwards to us. That's myself and our presenter for today. You need to be able to access the Q&A box, which is usually connected at the bottom of the screen. You can tap on Q&A and you can respond to questions that way, and we'll be keeping an eye on that and keeping a track on that. Likewise, if you have any urgent or pertinent questions you would like to ask our presenter today, then you can also pop those questions into the Q&A box and we will have a question session at the end. But without further ado, I am extremely honoured and happy to introduce today Michael, who is here with us. Now, I think this started out from probably about just over a year ago. So we had a session where quite a few of us got on board and came together to share ideas in technology. And essentially, Michael shared so many awesome ideas. I said, right, that's it. We're going to get you here for a webinar. So that's what we're doing today. And we're just going to tell you just a little bit about Michael. So Michael's been teaching for 13 years, 5 years of which here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Originally trained in design and technology, specialising in product design and electronics. Has taught every specialism of technology from year 30, sorry, year 7 to year 13, apparently except fashion. That's in the brackets here on the bio. And obviously taught GCSE and A-level over in the UK too. Has been an assistant head of faculty for 5 years. Sorry, I'm just trying to read the bio here coming through. Moved to New Zealand in 2019, and since has been in New Zealand, has taught basically hard materials, and is currently head of faculty at St Peter's in Cambridge. The subjects are offered at St Peter's are product design, resistant materials, fashion design, digital technologies, DVC, food and nutrition, and hospitality. So an awesome range of different technological areas. And without further ado, I'm actually going to pass this session over to the awesome Michael. And yeah, I will pop in every now and again if anybody has any awesome things to share with you too. So I'll see you in a moment, and I'm going to pass this over.
Kia ora, everyone. I'm hoping that Sarah can give me a little wave to check that you've got the same screen as. Oh, perfect from there. Hey, absolutely. I'm Michael. I'm really honoured to have been asked to present to you all today, and I really hope that I can hope to challenge some of your thinking and hopefully inspire in some future projects is my hoping. First of all, you might have guessed I'm from Yorkshire, so if you want to use Google Translate, you'll need to type in Yorkshire and translate. It's got its very own language from there, and you might need to replace some of the things there, but do feel free to jump in and ask any questions if you're not sure what I've quite said. I'm really honoured and lucky to be the head of faculty at St Peter's. I love working here. We're really fortunate. The students are incredibly fortunate to have all of these resources, but I have come from a background where I've had to nip down the local timber merchants and beg, borrow, or extra borrow some things in order to get through a course or a classroom. So I do know what it's like to be on the other side when money is really stretched. Hopefully I can introduce you to a different way of thinking that might not necessarily need to be all about the money that you've got available in your budget. So, hey, that's me. And just to clarify, um, this person is not me. Usually a common question when I say who I am. So this is my why. This is some of my past experiences have landed me here and this presentation today. As Sarah said, I started teaching in the UK and have taught a range of different areas there. And now I'm in New Zealand and I've taught NCEA and I've gone through my IB training. I've got a whole heap of things that I constantly want to revisit. I know that when I was at the recent TSAC event, I was constantly every night scratching my head going, how can we do this differently? And fortunately I could talk with colleagues going, well, what was your thinking? Oh, I want to just throw my schemes of work and my unit plans out the window and start all over again. But these are some of the things that I think are important to our Tamariki, and I really want to kind of challenge that today and ask you to join with me in that open-minded type of way of thinking. So there's some of the things I'm going to be looking at then is the importance of the design cycle, student pathways and that 7-year plan and how that would look, particularly from a technology perspective, and that incorporation of multi-materials. And I appreciate not everyone has a whole plethora of different subjects to offer within technology, but I do think that they're all important and we need to do our best to make sure that we're sharing this with our future students. I've just put that in the bottom corner. We currently offer year 7 and 8 on a rotation of 5, and that has its constraints and things that we're trying to look at to address going forward. We offer year 9 as a semester long project, and the year 10s there are for a year. I've put there in the purple box to kind of drain on and something that I'd like you to join and add into the Q&A section so I can kind of summarize, or Sarah can help me out and summarize these towards the end. But I'm intrigued to know what your junior, and I'm looking at younger than year 10, how your junior technology is structured at your school, and to look at those different models, and perhaps then in the future we could connect. And feel free to pop in there your email addresses and so on, and I'd love to connect with more people in the future to see what that would look like. We currently have this carousel of junior years, but that might not be the best model, so I'm out there looking and would be intrigued to hear back from you. So my question to you is, what do we really want our learners to know? We as professionals have what we enjoy and what our background is, and my background, I studied architecture at university, so really I should be teaching DVC, and somehow I've landed in the hard materials product design space. But I'm intrigued to keep asking this question of, what do we really want in this modern day, in this globally competitive, from this tiny little island at this end of the globe? What do we really need them to know for when they hopefully go off traveling and they get their jobs and whatever area, or hopefully in some area of technology they land in, but there'll be always something there. And what is it that we need them to do? What is it we need them to know? Do they need to be able to put up a shelf? Do we need them to be able to cook for themselves? Do we need them to be creative? Do we need them to be self-efficient, or deconstruct stuff mentally and physically? That's kind of the question I'd love us to look at. Now, having looked at and having taught IGCSE, GCSE and A-level, NCA and IB, and also adding the BCTO from a unit standard perspective, they're all very different and they're all targeted for our students in different ways. And I'm kind of going back to that lower school question again about, if our students, when they get to senior, have multiple options, maybe they've got the option of NCA, maybe they've got IB, maybe they've got a unit standard course pathway. What do we need them to be learning at our lower school? What is important, and what kind of experience should they be having? Now, back in the lockdown days, I'm sure you all remember it, I had a little bit of a IT problem, and I remember calling someone up to saying, hey, can you help me out here? And I got a bit of a flippant response back going, well, what do you need a computer for? You're just hammering nails into wood. And a little piece of me died, and a little piece of me was quite cross, and but it kind of drove a little spark in me, if you like, as to it is my job to try and reinvigorate and to try and drive and educate people, even those around us, even colleagues and adults around us, that it's so much more and it can be so much more. For example, this female here that has got this plastic that's made from scales, fish scales, winning the James Dyson Award some years ago. Like, that in itself is just amazing. I remember that coming out at lockdown, going, hey, I'm stuck here glued to this computer, and we've got people thinking that we're just hammering nails into wood, whilst the other end of technology is inventing this biodegradable plastic from fish scales. Now that in itself is like, wow, where could we land with a few more ideas and so on? That collaborative thinking, and I've got to pay Togo to things like the recent TSAC event. Just honestly, so many ideas coming together, driving towards the same thing. We've got to keep on building and working collaborative together. Now, what is the landscape of the 21st century? I recently listened to and was introduced to Dr. Philip Cummins, and I listened to this podcast, and there's some really cool ones that he's got to offer, so I encourage you to go and look for them. Now, in essence, if I just kind of summarize one of these podcasts that really got me thinking, was he was talking, my interpretation was he was talking about Henry VIII and lots of the wives it has and so on, and how that was a part of our history. But then it got me thinking, or his point was about, okay, so that was a part of a history which is still important, but is it really important for what we're doing right here and now? Which parts of our history should we be really looking at for the right here and now, particularly when you're planning? So we're halfway through the year. Many of us are thinking about, and have probably started about the next few weeks, and even how you're going to change courses. I've just been having conversations this week with the team about how we're going to change things, or how we can spin things on its head, or how we've not just quite got that right. And as a good teacher, you're possibly all doing that all the time. And so I really don't mean to teach anyone or ask anyone to suck eggs in this presentation, but just to get you thinking. So the point there with the whole Henry VIII was, what do we need? What is relevant for right now? Have we fallen down a rabbit hole? And I kind of feel very guilty of this. We often get a passion, or we have a burning area for a subject or something that we've seen or we really want to do. Often I find, and I look at colleagues in the past as well, in that we've our ideas, and that we become so heavily focused on that end goal. We're so heavily driven on, this is what we're making. This is our end goal. This is what we've got to drive to. And it's absolutely important to have those end goals. But what do we really need to get out of those students? Is it about that take home factor, and that's something that they can put on their dresser, and then when they get to my age, they're like, hey, look at that, I made that in year 10, and it's still there gathering dust? Or we have that conversation about those little projects that we've enjoyed doing, and I remember that teacher and so on. But is that still just as important? Do we perhaps need to be looking more about this whole factor now that we have got so many different technology areas, we've got so many different things going on, that maybe we need to be a lot more broader? And instead of us focused on and driving towards that end goal, this is what we've got to make, maybe we need to be about, what are we actually learning? What are the key skills? They are the focus. So it might not be that we take anything home, or that we've got a huge project that's we've put hours and hours and hours into. Is that still as important, or do we need to be doing a range of different things, a range of different skills that are going to equip us in lots of different areas? I was looking just the other day at some of the statistics for our year 7 and 8 going into year 9 and so on, and how many of them then continue through the years, and how many of them leave school and go into one of our immediate technology fields. It's not a huge amount. So what are those skills that we really need to be teaching at our junior years and our lower years, to be able to enhance them or equip them with things that they can then take away. That transferable skill, that problem solving, or how we can then apply what we've learned in the classroom to our life around us. And because we all know that once when we leave school or we then head to tertiary education or university, we know that that's when we specialize. That's when we really get to grips and we really pull our subject area, our topic in bits, and we really look at it on any which way. But at school level, is it not more about that holistic idea? Would it be not more logical to be thinking about all of the however many skills I can get into the subject? And sometimes we're governed by resources, and sometimes we're restricted by the assessment standards, so it forces us down that rabbit hole. But I ask that question of myself as well, how we could look back and think, what are the skills that I need these students to leave with? So the design cycle, this is one of the real big areas that I'm really passionate about. I think often we look towards that end goal and we've got that rabbit hole ideology of we've got to get towards that end. And sometimes we make it work. And quite often the student themselves is the stakeholder, is the client. And often it's going to be for them. So often lots of the things that we would naturally do in industry using that design cycle are overlooked. And I really believe that we should take a moment to go back to that in our unit planning and go, how are we explicitly going through this? Now, we know that the design cycle doesn't have to just be one full loop. There's lots of interchangeable and crossovers that can happen, and lots of things that can affect how long we spend on a particular area. And I know that particularly when we're working with year 7 and 8, we're very limited to time and so on. But if we looked at, and I'm going back to a year 8 example, if we looked at how we deliver that, is it important, once again, to get to that end product? Or could we just look at a particular area? And if, like us, you're on a carousel, could it be that each area of technology that's delivered focuses just on one area? If we just looked at that particular part of it, whether it's designing in your DVC space, or whether it's a manufacturing in your hard materials, or whether it's particularly working and focus on the client's needs in a food content, or whatever that might be, which area is most important, and so that we can then make sure that the students have understood that from a methodological approach, so that when they start to pull it in bits, when they get to senior level, I know that IB is very much about ripping that in bits, looking at those different angles. What have we got there and how does that look? Some of the things there in the bullet points I think are important to keep referring back to. I think that user center, particularly with the senior students, getting away from something that they secretly want themselves at home and making it as realistic as possible. I know that our food cohort have loved having guest speakers in their space and how they've really thought about designing for somebody else's need. A recent Matariki event that they did has really got those year 11s thinking about, oh, hang on a minute, it's not just what I want, it's for other people. And that in itself is a learning curve that lots of our students naturally, and we all did innocently, take for granted because we're selfish in that respect, because we don't seem to look out of that box until we get to a mature age. I've also got there open-ended. There's lots of trials and tests, like how we can still keep students engaged by being involved with things, with testing and trialing. They don't necessarily have to make anything. And I joked the other day with the food teacher in that they were looking at their knife skills, and they created a huge pile of compost, which actually was used for another purpose. But it was the idea of, okay, we're really honing in on these skills. These skills are more important before we go anywhere. And I think sometimes they're overlooked. Because of that, we've got to rush, we've got to race, we've got a time limit, we've got to make X product, and we've got to get this out the classroom so that mum and dad are really happy with the product that I've taken home. But we're the teacher and we need to hone that back, I believe, and we've got to take control of that. Oh, I've jumped too far there. So one of the studies there that a colleague introduced me to was about the skill set that we needed, or that we would ideally want our students to leave with. Now, I'm sorry about the quality of the picture, but I'm sure by reading some of the headings here in the middle, you can probably guess where I'm leading to with this. one of the things that they looked at was that the skills that were needed by the 2025 employees and what they really needed to be and what they needed to hold. So then I've got this hat on about thinking about what do my current year sevens need to be leaving with? What do my senior students need to be leaving with? What skills do they need that I can teach? And looking at that list there, I'm sure many of you are doing this on a daily basis, but are we explicitly looking at them and are we explicitly forcing them to do some of these things? Maybe it's something that we need to look at. Looking at this list here, you can see those top 15 skills that have been rated, and many of them are very much technology in a nutshell. If I just draw your attention to number 3, which was about that complex problem, and I look at this and then think, oh, okay, sometimes we're guilty, and the rabbit hole ideology again, that we're guilty of giving them a challenge. Okay, students, this is what we're going to make. Now I'm going to leave that up to you, or this is how we're going to do it, etc. Or it might be that this is a specification. These are the points that we're going to include in the project. And by doing so, are we really challenging them to come up with those complex problem solving? Are we really challenging them, or have we given them too much scope? And I know that we've often got that time against us, but what can we do and how could we reshape our thinking to try and make our students be a bit more aware of what's going on around them? Number one, analytical thinking. How many of us do a product analysis? How many of us ask the students to look at what's already on the market and how we could improve them, or tests or trials that have gone right or wrong and how we can improve them from there? So it's just a little bit of a thinking there, and linked with some of the podcasts that I've been listening to from Dr. Phil. One of the things here I think is worth going back to is that whole human-centered design, particularly as New Zealand needs to be globally competitive, and we need our designs to be just as good as the rest of the world, and how we can offer solutions to what's going on. I think the changes that forced us into the way of living when COVID came really did make us think about, okay, well, who's number one, and how are we going to, as educators, how are we going to help those students think about doing things in a little bit more different? And like I say, youngster students often have only got themselves to think about, or their immediate whānau. How can we really get them to think about other people around us? I know it's something that we try and do as educators in general, but how can we do it within our classroom, and how we could possibly think about other people? Sorry, Sarah.
Hi, I'm just gonna actually add some to your
Oh,
conversation you're going on, because you've got some
go for
people
it.
who are being really interactive here as well and sharing some of their ideas and thoughts too. But we've got one teacher who's saying that to obviously enable that development of analytical thinking and things like that, they use Solo to structure analysis of existing designs. So that's really awesome.
Thank
And
you.
we've also got some ideas saying they're using problem solving, planning, and catering for the whole school, with their years 6, 7, and 8 classes, where they're cooking recipes and meals for the whole school as a technological focus. So they're trying to think of those authentic contexts, I think it is,
Yeah.
so that they can actually enable the learning that way. So that's some people who've shared some of their ideas.
Cool. And thank you very much for that last one as well. I just honestly, having spoke with the food teacher that's been delivering these Matariki challenges and something else we were planning for the end of term, the passion that you hear and see from those students, it's almost like that the famous moment of when the penny drops and it lights a little spark inside you and you're like, yeah, that's why I'm a teacher. I can really hear that. And to have been a part of that, I would definitely encourage you to think about ways in which you could involve the rest of your school. And equally so, it can also mean that you've got the rest of the school listening and going, hey, technology is not just one of those subjects in the background. It's one that we need to be listening to and paying attention to, because they get involved just as many as all those subjects. Thank you, Sarah.
That's right. And we've just had someone just pop in a link for if anybody's interested. There's a link to a Google site from tamariki.ac.nz, which is looking at year 12 product design and product research. So if anybody wants to scope that out and have a look at what they're doing there, thanks for sharing.
Fantastic. Yeah, brilliant. Sarah, are we able to keep hold of those things at the end?
I will ask one of my team, one of my lovely members, to see if they can copy and paste some of these links for us into a document, and we
Fantastic.
can share them with you.
Brilliant. Because the secretly agreeing to do this presentation was I'm hoping that some of the collective that are listening will help me out and inspire me and definitely challenge my thinking too. Thank you, Sarah. So leading to that, a great segue there is educating others and thinking about those boundaries and those misunderstandings. I know that on a repeat basis, I'm often speaking with colleagues who have got their mindset for when they was a child and they walked in the wood workshop and what they did in school. And often I'm going, it's quite a bit different now. We've got different things going on and evolution has happened. And I know we've got some kind of constraints in things like the New Zealand curriculum, but I do think there's ways in which that we can look at changing those. Now question here for you is, are we creating our own boundaries by naming it wood, metal, textiles, DVC, whatever? Sometimes when you do just say, oh, we're doing woodwork, I've experienced it firsthand. I've got parents going, oh, you don't need to do woodwork because they've got no intention of being a builder. And that's their narrow-minded, straight to the point thought. But the moment you remove the keyword of wood or woodwork, and we've got design technology, or we spun it in a different way, or we've named it something different, then that could start to tie things together. I know that often people think that technology is just computers and often mistake it just for that. We just sat at a computer and we're as we know it as digital technology. So even just that terminology. In my little thing here, I've put, when planning a new project, and I'd be intrigued to know what you think here, so please drop this into the question and answer session. But when you're planning something new, what is your priority? What is your focus? Do you think, I'd love to make that project, I'd love to make that product, that's what we're going to do? Or do you think, okay, what do the students need to think about? And from that, I'm going to introduce my 7-year plan or my thought of it. Now, I don't profess to have all the answers here, but I know I've done some work with the team here at St. Peter's and even SLT, and having that conversation about, yes, every student has got a different pathway. So what are the main ones and which way are they heading to? So what skills do they need to know? And I go back to my earlier point about, yes, not every student is going to stay with you right the way from year 7 to 13. Or you may only have them start them at year 9. But either way, what is it we have a duty to make sure that we're educating them with the transferable skills? What is it that you need them in the classroom to be knowing? What is it they can actually physically do? And what do you need them to leave with? That again is how I would structure, looking at this simple format on your screen. That's how I would set things up, and I would work it backwards. So I would list in the senior years, these are the skills that I need. This is what they need to be able to do. I need them to perhaps use CAD CAM. I need them to be able to problem solve. I need them to be creative. I need them to be analytical and so on. And then when I'm designing my units at year 12 and lower and so on, and I appreciate that 12 and 13 is often restricted by the assessment, but those skills can still be at the forefront of your planning, particularly if you're like us, where you've dropped NCA level 1, and it's an opportunity to think, where are those skills coming from, or what are they missing? What can't they do? And often with your assessment for learning strategies, you can find them out quite quickly, and they're like, oh, okay, nobody's actually thought about looking, like we all jump onto Google, but do we actually look for positives and negatives? Do we actually seek each other's feedback as fluently, instead of just that whole teacher of, yeah, that's a great idea, well done, keep working? Or actually, no, that's not going to be practical, and force that into your units, getting other feedback from each other, taking it home. And sometimes mum and dad are all about, yeah, you've done a really good job, son, I'm really proud of you. But actually, if we put that into a real life content, how feasible, how practical would that be? And that's how I would look at it. That's how we've done it in the team. We've had some good brainstorming sessions where we thought about how we can I don't want to use the word dilute because that suggests it's not as important, but how can we introduce those skills at younger years, simply simplifying them, and then we can build on them. And by the time they get to the senior level, they've been doing them on repeat. We know that repetitive learning is what consolidates that and improves our learning as we go on. So what are your current pathways of your students? That'd be a first question I'd be looking at. Last year we went through some changes from wood and metal to product design and resistant materials, and we redesigned resistant materials to cater for those students that were beelining for a tertiary type education where unit standards was their pathway that they needed to succeed in what they wanted to do. And why are they choosing our subjects? Is it because they've got a real passion for something? I'm sure you're all connected with your students, but have you really had that conversation about what do you want to do when you leave school? Is there something that we could actually be teaching them? Or is there a head of year or dean out there that can perhaps influence where you're going from there? And then also, and I know this is sometimes a good thing and sometimes a constraint, but what are the skill sets of our teaching team? What are they passionate about, or what is their background? I feel like you're going to ask a question, Sarah.
No question.
Oh,
It's just that we've got some really great contribution coming in. So obviously
oh,
you're
brilliant.
inspiring lots of people to think about some really good stuff and also wanted to share their ideas. So we've got like one representative here saying we have 3 tech teachers, food tech, materials and processing and DVC, DT mix. Very heavy SLT management in the second 2 subjects. So tech teachers have little autonomy in decisions. All tech teachers must teach every technology IO in their class and report. And they also need to teach STEM, Tereo, literacy, maths within those 7 or 15 lessons. So
Wow.
it's showing that some people have got a lot to consider when they're actually putting some of these different ideas together and thinking about some of their processes. And then we've had lovely Karen. Thank you, Karen, who's been shared a link to all her solo stuff that she's got for people. So I'll make sure you get a link to that one as well. And then finally, we've got Andrew who's saying that when they're developing a new unit, they consider whether it'll be manageable, cost effective, enjoyable, and provide an opportunity to learn new skills that the students can continue to develop. And they also have the question that do they have the equipment that's needed? So some really great discussion points starting to come through, which obviously you're inspiring at the moment.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much to all of those. That's really cool and really good to listen. Listen, I've been there and I've really had to work hard to try and get in some of those examples there to get SLT to sit up and listen. You know, full support with you. I have been there. Keep on chipping. Keep on promoting yourself. Keep on doing what you can to, like that example of working with another faculty. Can you join another area? So perhaps somebody in there mentioned learning Tirio. Maybe there's a way in which that you could be learning the names and the language at the same time as a project. Find the skills that would be traditionally taught within Matauranga Māori and how we could incorporate those together. My other kind of thought was after one of those comments there was about year 7 and 8. It's about that experience, in my opinion, and it's about that mixture and how they start to see the world around us. Like we're all looking at a screen, but we're all probably sat on a almost wooden desk or chair or something of those equivalent. We've got those things around us and those skills, but to what extent do the year 7s or the year 8s really need to be coming out with that end product and mixing them in with other things? Sorry, that answer was a little bit waffly there. Okay, here's a really passionate area for me, the design process. I can't really emphasize it enough. Now, my question to you is, how many of us explicitly teach the design process? And this might be more something that you think about with a senior level hat on, but how many of us, and looking at those, and that's quite a detailed version there, but how many of those do we actually go through? And then how much of it do you as an educator actually value? Do you, if you had a metaphorical pen here, would you be scribbling out and going, no, I don't really need that. I could ditch that. I'm stuck for time. I'm going to cut that out. But my question to you would be, what kind of an impact would that have if you started to scribble some of these out? If you're not already explicitly going through some of these. Now, I know some of this can be dry, in particular, if you've got um, a group that you need to keep actively engaged and keep them on their feet, keep them busy. But looking at ways in which you could bring them in, could you jump backwards and forwards? Okay, today we're going to evaluate. Evaluate doesn't need to be that we sat down writing. Evaluate could be a verbal discussion. It could be that we're going to get up and poke and look at each other's testing and trialing that they've looked at. The evaluating doesn't just have to be at that end perspective. But anyway, I'm going off a tangent. So if we had to look at this, do you think that your design process would look probably more like this? Have you perhaps cut a few things out? I've got a design brief. This is what we're going to make, kids. This is what we're going to do. The kid comes to the door. What we're making, say, we're making this. Are we going to develop it? Or, well, I've pretty much written it for you, kids. We've got a time limit against us. Is there some of these things that we're missing out? And what kind of impact is that going to have? And is it because we're driven by the assessment standard criteria? Do we need to go back and look at some of these? And is it dictating what's important? Because I'm really passionate about how all of these are just as important. You don't have to use this for every one of your projects, but you might work in your faculty. Okay, in DVC, you're going to focus on perhaps the development part, and you're going to develop that idea few or more times. It might be that in food, you're going to look at that inquiry part, that designing of or developing the idea. Go back. What is the research there? What is the nutritional needs? Who is it for? Go back to why are we doing this? And I really urge you to try and think about how we can then put this into our next lot of planning. So looking at these areas that I've circled, I think that there's room for them. And I said earlier about analysis. How many of us do we actually analyze existing products? A good activity there where you're looking at something that's already out there. You're giving opinions. You're giving feedback. You could be giving peer assessment and so on. And I just think that some of those that get missed out are just equally as important. Do we get blindsided by that end product? Go for it, Sarah.
Yeah, I'm just going to add to this one because actually it's really interesting to say what you're saying about obviously like what do we miss? Is there anything that maybe the standards might actually hint towards not leaving out and things like that? And I think one of the ones that I've seen in my experience is usually it's the evaluating stage, which can actually get missed out a lot. Whether it's the final evaluation of the outcome that's been made or whether it's that ongoing reflection throughout the whole process, I think one of the most important bits, which is getting them thinking critically about what they're doing, is usually the bit that's actually missed out. And when you look at, like, say, even the level 1 materials and processing standards come out, you only actually have to evaluate on 1.1. You don't have to evaluate to get excellence. So actually for achieved in merit, evaluation isn't actually written in the criteria. So I think it's down to us as teachers to put that importance back there in the process.
Absolutely, Sarah. And evaluation, again, doesn't have to be at the end. So you come up with some design ideas. Let's do some evaluation between our ideas. Let's swap sheets. Let's have a look at each other's and then give that feedback. And then you can start to think, okay, am I really meeting the brief that I set out to do? Does it look the way I intended it to do, that I decided, and so on and so forth? And again, not teaching you how to suck eggs, but it can be at any given point. And it might be that for your project, you've gone, okay, for this concept, for this unit of work, we're not going to evaluate at the end. Evaluation is going to be throughout, and we're not going to purposely not going to do one at the end, because it might be, and I'm thinking year 7 to 9 here, that there's a particular area to evaluate on, or you're going to focus on one of these areas. But I do think that by the time they've had an experience, and whether that's over a few years or over the year or a semester, we really should, and I believe we should be covering all of these points here.
Yes, we have just got some feedback from somebody as well saying the extent of their design process that they use in their school depend on the standards being used at the school. So this particular school obviously have a lot of unit standards, which are predominantly skills based. They do some achievement standards, but they're saying that you're probably correct in saying that the focus is on the finished product as opposed to the actual process. And I mean, I don't think it has to be like that when you're teaching unit-based skill standards stuff at all. That's an element of
Yeah,
the design process enables people to actually use those skills that they've learned through the standards and actually take that learning deeper and further, as to opposed to just making one product at the end.
absolutely. I just can't stress that enough. I just said the other day to the resistant materials teacher who was focused on that end product, I was like, it's okay if their product is not as good as what you would like it to be, because they
Yeah.
can see, the student themselves can see lots of these things. They've developed that idea 3 or 4 times. It's still not working, but they've gone through that process, and it's a skill that we as human beings and as adults have to do all the time. It's not always going to work, and it's about that learning. And for me, it's about that skill that they're developing.
Awesome.
So have we got any wheel? I put that in there thinking, um, anyway, we'll keep going unless there's any questions you can think of or that have come through, Sarah.
No, at this stage, I think keep going and we'll just keep jumping in and out, because I think some people would really like to know some different ideas of projects that you've done.
Okay, cool. Okay. So this is where the pressure comes out. I don't profess to have all of the answers for all of your next projects, but maybe there's some ideas out there that you could start to think about. This is the kind of the criteria that I create for myself when I'm thinking skills based. So, okay, what are the skills I want my students to learn in this particular unit? And by using this little bit of a rough list here will help me to try and get through that. And even though they might not necessarily have a product to take home, they've covered a whole heap of things. So I think the first thing there is mixed materials. There's heaps of specialisms and what people have, but as a good teacher, we always put ourselves out of our comfort zone and look for those. Oh, okay, what can I mix this with? And I've got some more examples coming up. I'd look at mixed processes. So I know often we've only got one of everything. So I've only got one vacuum former. I've only got one of this. So how can I create a little bit of a carousel within my classroom? How could I set up with a little bit of training? And it can be done. I've done it with students where you train them to move to a different station that's got a different activity on there. We used to call it hinge point questioning, where you give them an assessment or a test of some description, and then they go away and find the answer from those stations of working. But in doing so, you're introducing them to different processes that they might be a little bit rusty or might need as a revision tool even. It doesn't have to have an end use. Of course, advantage if it does. Try and keep them short, snappy. So if you've got a double lesson or a single lesson, right in your head, this is what we're learning. These are your learning objectives. This is what we're going to do, and it's going to start and end here, and that's all we're going to do. And we might not visit that again until you're introducing it into something, and maybe you might use it in that particular example in an end product. Personal and peer reflections. I think once again, students can be quite self-centered, so encouraging them to hear from each other, encouraging them to think, okay, how can I get them to look outside their head so to work, and that leads into group work, and often sometimes having that open-ended. So your challenge is to design or come up with a solution for, and then you get lots of frustrated learning. Sometimes you get one or two that are off to start with, but that frustrated learning, eventually you can then start to intervene and you can help them along the way. But with that frustration, that's that crucial moment of what could I do? How could I tackle this? And they could only sometimes answer that by using their pre-learned skills. If I was doing a project-based idea, we could look at exploring the design idea in depth. We could look at that in the form of chunks, trying to make that relatable as much as possible. Something that they've done, something that might be going on around school, something that you know you can get a guest speaker in with. And it could just be a prototype. It doesn't have to be a finished product. It could be a model of some description that perhaps you've done a few times. Maybe you've modeled it in CAD, in cardboard, and you've come up with those ideas. But that maybe that's as far as you'll go with it, because that's the area that you've decided, or the skill set that you've decided to focus on. Um, Sometimes you get told a little bit like to stay in your own lane. That's not your subject area. Often we get asked to teach outside our areas. I know that the first time I got asked to teach a particular food topic or whatever, I'm thinking, heck, I don't know anything about this. And it's a little bit like I need to stay in my lane. But I think you should be showing them this picture and just go for it. Throw yourself at it. We've got to inquire to improve. So therefore, put yourself out your comfort zone. You go and ask another colleague for help. I am sure most colleagues would be like, yeah, I'll help teach my area because it's a benefit to me and X, Y, and Z. So a few ideas then, and I'll start whizzing through these. Feel free to ask any questions. So with an open-ended, and this could be a bit loose, I forget what my brief was at the moment, but if we're designing a light, we've got a few different examples of how we could start to tackle that. Even the bottom one there, out of cardboard, so it really doesn't need to be expensive. It doesn't need to be laser cut, but looks a little bit neater. We've got those options there. We could be looking at recycled items. We could think about how those could all be mixed together, and having that little bit of a checklist there. Have I included this to help me come up with some different ideas? We've got a bit of steam bending in there. This was an old science desk when they ripped out the science labs. Go and beg, borrow, or steal that bit of timber. If you're keen on the CAD side of things, we've got some different options there, what that could look like from a modeling perspective. That could just be made out of cardboard. Developing the steam project at the moment that I'm really enjoying doing out of thin plywood. And just a disclaimer, some of these pictures are from colleagues, and some of them I've done years ago, so I've had to go and look for something similar on the internet. But feel free to ask me questions, or I'll see if I've got any units that I can help you with. I do think there's a real need for mixing materials. Simplified then, these could be your smaller ones, looking at different ideas that are mixing those ideas together. It could be done by hand, it could be done by CNC engravers and so on. What have you got? You could have some pewter casting in there, is always a good one. Building up the different layers, you could do that by hand. I know that a traditional skill is doing it through cuttlefish, but I prefer to do it on a laser engraver and create the whole sandwich there. You can see with that star idea, we would build it up as we go, as long as you've got the channel in one way. I know that you can use resin or nail varnish paint to help emboss colors and so on, keeping the costs down there. You could look at different ways in which you're joining materials together, bending, line benders. They're not that expensive, but you could be looking at acrylic. I don't know how many of you actually worked in acrylic, but quite often we turn to the laser cutter. Yes, it creates a much nicer thing. One of the things that I'm doing with the year 10s at the moment is I've got them to make a little picture frame, and we've made it by hand, and we've made a small one on purpose because the amount of them that they've had to go back through and buff out and polish, or that have split in some areas. And we start with a smaller keyring project to start with, because most of the keyrings end up breaking because it's the working properties of the materials that they've not experienced. But then by the time you've made something like this desk organizer at the ends there, they've had a real good go at using CAD/CAM, as well as some hand manufacturing skills there, and a little bit of vacuum forming to finish off with that insert from there. Or even the clock. Everyone loves the clock project, and we've got the option there of this could be out of thinner materials. This could be out of your reclaimed. I know that PET is on the rise there with the whole bottle top. This could be that. I have laser cut them, so that could be an option. Laser cutting, engraving, and so on, to build up those. That easily could be done in different materials. You could have recycled things there. They could be looking for waste products to find different colors, find different textures, even, and that's something else to think about. It might be if you're focusing on a particular skill from a CAD perspective, CAD CAM as well. What is that task? What are we being asked to do? We're looking at joining materials together. How can we join them together without the need of wood, without a glue, screw, nails, etc.? How can we think about how they go together, and what kind of, if you wanted to make a product out of the end of it, where could that lead, and what could that look like? You could even introduce some lighting into them. This sphere here was actually vacuum formed on both sides. Vacuum forming is underrated, and blister packaging is used in heaps of different things, and is a small, I would say, cost effective project to help learn about that three-dimensional transformation from something that's in 2D. And again, some small pieces of acrylic added into there. The speaker project is quite a popular one, but it opens up to what skill sets you have. You know, you've got a simple butt joint here for what was available as a skill set for that particular individual, or you could then go a little bit further and even with this leather handle engrave or remove some of the leather there to make a bit more patterned, or to add that embossing. The little feet here were turned down on the lathes, introducing another element, another skill from there. And this front, I'm pretty sure, was when we 3D printed that. You can see that. Or did we use the CNC miller there? We've got some different elements or examples here. I know that this was a very popular Year 9 one. We're introducing here some inspiration. So in this particular, these examples, introducing from a particular movement, so Art Deco or Rennie Mackintosh, introducing them, asking the students to look again, not thinking about themselves, but focusing on that designer or that artist or that movement, and thinking about how they can introduce that into their project. I've got a Year 13 student at the moment who's making a flat packable light where the pieces slot together, but he's using architecture. And if you think about a cityscape, he's flipping it the other way up. And the food teachers don't know yet, but this is going to be their new lighting in their above their barista space. But it's something that he's looked at, his inspiration and his source, and that's sometimes overlooked when we're missing out the things in the design cycle. We think, oh no, we're just going to head to it, but we forget to think about that source of inspiration and where that comes from. I know we do it explicitly in DVC, but in the rest of technology, is that something we focus on? And even keeping the cost down out of cardboard. Highly flammable when you're using this on the laser cutter, but just a heads up, it could even be something that you'd introduce with your craft knives and so on. And this one here was some senior students that were focus again was on skills, not necessarily on the end outcome. They had to hold a test tube, and that's a very small factor of it, but they had to think about how the architecture could inspire them to come up with a solution to hold it. Here then are a few different ideas. I'd love to see more fashion products using this conductive thread. I think there's a real scope for it. We used to do a pencil case at junior school, and I know pencil cases are fading out, but there's an option there for a bag. When it's open, it's a conductive circuit. When it's closed, it's broken, and vice versa. An option there to look at how we can incorporate electronics. Doesn't have to be just lighting. It could be using our sensors and so on from there. This bottom one here, this little desk light, is a very popular one that I do with the younger years, and the teacher who's actually delivering it is not a specialist in this area, and the kids are loving it. And you wouldn't know it wasn't her specialist, and she's really excelling at doing really well there. And the kids, and this is one of the examples, look how professional that looks. The kids have had to use a range of different manufacturing skills. They start off with smaller pieces of acrylic that they cut out by hand, and then we look at how we could improve that by putting it through CAD/CAM. So kind of a bit of a repeat, but they can see the process. It's a little bit like that whole important skills. It's important to teach the traditional things, but it's also to marry them up and back them up with a modern process. Learning to walk before you can run, and putting the two of the ideas together. Our fashion teacher has been a great example of using a mixture of different things. We've done 3D printing for some of the things that we enter for the World of Wearable Arts and the Hokanui Awards that they're heading off for this weekend. And we've done laser engraving on denim. Denim's fantastic to be laser engraved. It lifts the color really well. So I encourage you to have a play around with that, and think about how you could incorporate again electronics into outfits like a garment, perhaps a costume or something there, how that could be married up. I know that many structures, particularly when it comes to things like shoulder pads, we had a young female student who really wanted some strong shoulder pads, a little bit like inspired by Lady Gaga, Lady Gaga, and her shoulder pads was an area of which she came over to look at how she was going to bend some sheet metal and so on. Need to keep going. So, sustainability. Plastic is all around us. We need to make sure that we're encouraging and harnessing in as many different ways as possible. Our food teacher at the moment is really succeeding with some molding that she's been working on with her group. And they've been using MDF molds to come up with a design. It started off with chocolate, then being a food teacher, we started to introduce a few flavors in there, lemon, orange, seasonal, things like that. And then that started to grow more, and the ideas from vacuum forming. We started to look at jelly molds, and there you can start to introduce flavors, different fruits in there, different combinations and how they all work together. And even we've had the idea just the other day about how this could then extend into sushi molds. And if you're thinking about something that you might do for the rest of the school, how cool would it be to have some kind of mold or something that would perhaps represent your school or your fan or or whatever it might be, and then you present them this food that of course is delicious but has that kind of shape or pattern to what you're working with, would really start to get that SLT. You know, the person that mentioned about SLT, I think perhaps you need to drop them a few gifts off on their desk and just remind them where these things are being made from. And we know that PET has taken off. I know that there's lots of combinations there. I urge you there to look at Brothers Make and see how you can incorporate those recycling things in there and get creative with it. It's flexible, it's strong, it's versatile. It can be heated, it can be reheated. Look at the working properties of some of these materials that we've got. Again, remove the idea about the end product and start to play with it. Go back to your trialing and testing and see what you can come up with. I'm teamed up, or I'm going to team up with the commerce department, and we're going to start looking at how we can make these on a large scale for our market days. And it's not going to cost us the earth, because it's going to be using these materials that are unfortunately polluting the earth. James Dyson Foundation, I'd encourage you to jump on and visit their website. There are some resources on there, and they've often got competitions on there that might help to inspire you and link with from there. Technologystudent.com, bit of an old-fashioned website, but I think it's a whole heap of resources there for you. Definitely, if you put in the whole technologystudent.com followed by what you're looking for, there's a whole heap of resources there for you. And someone introduced me again to the Ministry of Inspiration, which is worthwhile looking at, particularly for our lowest and youngest Tamariki from there. I'd encourage you to try and break that silo. I talked and said about how we're joining with commerce with a few projects. And I'd also encourage you, you might have a, say, DVC teacher and a hard materials teacher, but try and bring them even closer together. Can they do a little bit of each? Can we really look at how we bring them together, and how that might work? For example, I have done in the past where students would perhaps make a product in food, and then we're going to package it in DVC so they can see that journey and see why that's relevant, or vice versa, and we can bring them together. Just one example there of bringing it here. Now, for 2025, we're undergoing a few changes, and we've been looking at this idea of how we can break down those silos and how we can start to think, okay, for our year 7 and 8, what is that experience? What are those skills, and what do we need to do? So one idea could be that we look at having more of an open content, so a party, which then can be interpreted in a million different ways by your teacher and by your students. And there's a few outcomes of what that could look like. So it could be that they're still on some kind of carousel, because that's what you're given, but it could be that that product, or that concept of, in this case, party, continues with those students. And as they go to their next teacher who prepares them with different skills, they're constantly looking about this challenge. I've got to come up with something for this party, or is it a game? Is it a gift? Is it an element within that, or is it even an outfit or something that's related to that concept? And looking at those examples, you can see how there we might interweave those different areas together, or something like that. Here is a couple of projects. Sarah, are you going to jump in with a comment?
I'm just making you aware that it is 5 o'clock and your hour is nearly up. So if you really want to share some really cool ideas, please feel free. But I'm just
this is my last slide.
Okay.
So, different examples here, mixture of things here together. This rocking chair was actually made by a student who was doing fashion, who started off making this cushion and then fell in love with what we all had to offer. So I was like, yes, great, good collaboration there of showing the different things. And I'll just wrap these up. Fiber optic, this was made out of concrete and cement, using the fiber optic wires that were connected and touching on the inside, and in the dark, they kind of glittered up a bit like the veins in your eyes. And we've got a mixture of different materials there. And I just wanted to kind of ask the people that were still listening, and thank you for holding in there, of what ideas that you could contribute. My thinking is, if each person today contributed one idea that would work for their Tamariki, then we all go home with a whole heap of ideas, in hope. And that's just about everything. Thank you very much for listening to this Yorkshire accent waffle on.
Kia ora. Thank you very, very much, Mike. I mean, wow. I mean, what a session. Very thought-provoking, very insightful. I mean, I've been teaching this for quite a few years now, and even me buzzing with lots and lots of ideas. And what I really liked is I'm just linking back to something that I've experienced this week, because my son has just just had his first ever year 9 hard materials lessons, and he came on and I thought, yes, come on, this is my area, this is it, I can help you with this, what are you going to do? And he came back and said, Mum, today my first lesson I learned to use a bandsaw, and I've been told my first project is a wooden box. And I nearly died inside. So what is amazing is that you've shown a whole heap of ideas here that could go from your younger kids, from your year 7s, all the way through. And depending on, obviously, the skills and the techniques that they own, it doesn't matter the context of the project and what they're working through. You can actually make that low floor, high ceiling approach with the different skills and techniques that you're using to create some of these amazing ideas. I mean, who would have thought of putting cyber optic things to make an eyeball? It's pretty phenomenal. So I just want to say, yeah, thank you very much for that, Kapai.
Kia ora, thank you.
Yeah, and so some people have done things like wearable tech projects. I know there's quite a few people out there that are sharing some of those awesome ideas, especially with the weaving of e-textiles in there. I know that's a big focus for quite a few people nowadays, is that connection and weaving different aspects, not only just weaving from different tech areas, but weaving in, because remember, if you're thinking of things like that, you've got all your links to science as well, and weaving in obviously your health and PE stuff in with what we do. And we have so many connections. I always say that technology is that umbrella subject. Yeah, technology is the overarching bit, and everything falls out of technology. We actually use all those skills and make it real. So
so definitely like a stuck record to keep repeating that, especially to our SLT. Keep listening, keep going. You've got this, team.
Awesome. Oh, Peter just shared a really great idea where they've reused old UHT milk cartons to make wallets, and they're water.
Oh, wow.
So that's a really great idea. We love some of these ideas.
Wow.
Just before we finish today, and we finish off obviously the whole webinar, would anybody be able to contact you if they want to be more inspired? And if so, would you have contact details to share?
Yes, absolutely. So it's my full name, michael.moore@stpeters.school.nz.
Fantastic.
And you'll be more than welcome. I don't have the answers, but I'm more than happy to chew over ideas with people if I can be of help.
Well, thank you very, very much. I mean, yeah, like I've said, an awesome, inspiring session. I'm going to definitely recommend this to a lot of my tertiary students at YCASO, because I think they will be totally inspired and actually get the idea of what technology is and that vision behind the technology curriculum. And it's really come through today. So thank you very, very much for your time and for sharing some of these different ideas. We will pop the comments that people have popped into the Q&A. We are copying those as well for Michael to have a look at, so we will share those with him too.
Thank you.
That's all right. And so we just would like to say, once again, a great big thank you to Michael. Those of you who are attending today or watching this as a webinar, if you please could give us some feedback. The feedback is related to the fact that obviously we are putting out these webinars for you, and it gives you chance to be able to suggest other offerings that you would like TENS to actually find for you and put together as well for these Wednesday webinars. Also, and just a quick reminder, this webinar, if you forgot any of that stuff, or you want to be inspired, or you want to share this presentation with the rest of your teams, this will be up on YouTube in the next few days. So just keep an eye out on that. It will be announced on social media, and you will all actually have this, the content, the link to the video actually sent through to you as well, for those people who have attended today. And a quick plug for our webinar for August. We have got the awesome Boo Windsor, who is one of the education support people at the Antarctic Centre in Christchurch, and she's going to be sharing lots and lots of different ideas to do with science and technology through the Antarctic lens. So we are looking forward to that. If you would like to register for that event, keep an eye out on the TENS events page, and you'll be able to access the link to register for that. And without further ado, I just want to say thank you very, very much to Michael today. I know we put you on the spot with this one, but I'll tell you something, I'm going to get you again to do some of these webinars because that was amazing. So thank you for your contribution and for giving up your time voluntarily as well to help and support us and to support other educators out there, because that's what TENS is all about. So
Kia ora, thank you.
We'll just finish with our karakia. Ki amato katoa. Kua motu mato ia mato mahi, ia mato kaupapa hoki. Arahina mato ki koe, mato ia mato he papa, kia whakatapua, mato ki na kaupapa, me na mea e whakapono. Mena kitia mai mato. Kia kite, kia ora everyone.